my name is Jacqueline Mason and you are watching No Health Magazine News. Today we'll be talking about the diseases through the decades, which you can also read about in our No Health magazine. Here to talk about their experience with the coronavirus, the 21st century pandemic, is Jacqueline Parson. To talk about their experience being a part of the AIDS and HIV protests is special guest Jacqueline Gillison. And to talk about their loved ones' experience with the yellow fever is special guest Jacqueline Silverstone. And here to talk about their experience with the smallpox disease is special guest Jacqueline Peralta. Only 2 years ago, the coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, a sickness that can be deadly but now has vaccines and boosters, took the world, more specifically in this case, America, by storm. And even now in 2022, we are still experiencing the effects of the coronavirus. During quarantine, there have been many Americans who have decided to change their lifestyle choices, such as their food palettes, in order to better themselves mentally and physically during this hard time for everyone. Sadly, there have been many more Americans who have experienced the more negative side of the quarantine, like many high school students who have experienced deep declines in both their grades and social skills. Here to talk more about that is Jacqueline Parson, a high school student who is now finishing their junior year off in high school when they were only a few months away from finishing their freshman year of high school when quarantine struck. So how did you first feel when you heard about the lockdown?
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't really know what to think. I was very confused. And I would say like a month later, I realized how difficult it was to manage my grades and to keep in contact with my teachers only through email.
Well, that leads us into our next question. How would you say your sophomore year went in terms of your grades and friends and everything else?
During my sophomore year, I began at a new high school, and during that year, I was also put into, I believe, 3 different honors classes, and I had never been put into an honors class before that. And while I was very excited, I also didn't know what to expect. And my first semester went fairly smoothly in terms of grades, but I also realized that my social skills were declining tremendously. During my second semester, I began to talk more in my virtual classes to my teachers and to different classmates, which I realized was really difficult for me, not only because it was a new school, but also because I had forgotten how to actually talk to different people over quarantine.
And finally, how are you doing now in high school and socially overall?
I would say that I'm doing a lot more better, and everything has completely changed since everything was virtual. And this entire year we've been in person, and I've become a lot more talkative, and I have different friend groups now that I'm very proud of, and I have grown a lot closer to different people this year. I think I will continue to improve as I relearn how to communicate and maneuver around in a more normal world, which we haven't had or seen in like 2 years.
Our next topic is AIDS and the real sickness, the prejudice that the disease carries. The discrimination against people who are a part of the LGBTQ+ community can stem from a lot of different sources. The AIDS epidemic and the HIV epidemic were both once called the gay diseases, and this was a result of the reality of society judging too quickly based off of false or misunderstood information. Since AIDS was considered a disease among only gay men who were a part of the LGBTQ+ community and transgender women were often turned down for treatment, no matter how urgent. First, Ms. Gillison, why did you decide to start participating in the AIDS and HIV protests? What made you want to be a part of that movement?
I wanted to be a part of this movement because the disease is misunderstood on so many different levels and has been misunderstood since the 90s and the 80s. And what I mean by misunderstood, I mean people have constantly looked at the disease and thought it was only among the LGBTQ+ community. And more specifically, people have only seen it as being only amongst gay men or gay or bisexual men who are sexually active. In reality, this disease is not only held over that community, it's also held over the heterosexual community as a whole, and people have misinterpreted that, and there is not enough awareness about AIDS among everyone, especially among gay men, because of prejudice against gay men and homophobia against the LGBTQ+ community as a whole.
Can you explain how you feel about the prejudice against people who deal with this disease and why you feel that way?
I think the prejudice is very unnecessary, especially because we need more help than hate right now at the moment, especially with this disease, because it is a deadly disease, which can be treated, but it doesn't always go the way we want it to, even with the treatment. I feel this way about the prejudice because while working alongside people during the protests, I've made different friendships and relationships with people who I've met during these protests over the years, and some of these people have lost their lives due to AIDS. The prejudice and homophobia has also made people afraid to admit that they have AIDS, which is very dangerous, especially for their potential future partners, especially if they don't disclose their sexually transmitted diseases. It can result in them risking their partner's lives.
This next disease takes place in the 19th century. This disease was known as the disease with an intermission. It is called yellow fever. It started in smaller villages and it spread throughout larger cities, and it eventually became a global disease and started to spread through mosquitoes. As slavery increased, so did the disease because of mosquitoes invading ships as enslaved people were being transported. Here to speak about how this disease affected their husband is special guest Jacqueline Silverstone. What is the yellow fever disease from your perspective of seeing it in your late husband?
During the first few stages of the yellow disease, it includes the common flu and symptoms of a headache, muscle aches, a fever that lasts for about 2 or 3 days. And then shortly after my husband felt better and was completely back up on his feet, it was about 2 days after feeling better that he began hemorrhaging and to vomit blood. And he went through that for about 2 weeks, and the doctor we talked to about this said that his internal organs were being attacked and that he was suffering from yellow fever. My husband died within 11 days of that, and that was the second phase.
After your husband suffered from this disease, what did you do after his passing?
I began to research the disease and asked doctors about it, and I found out that what my husband died from was a very rare sickness that was on its rise in the 1800s. Every doctor and scientist I talked to said that there is very little possibility of the yellow fever disease to pop up in another person for another 10 years, and even then it wouldn't be widespread.
Next, we'll talk about smallpox. Smallpox traveled from the European settlers to North America in the late 1700s and is now known as one of the most deadliest diseases ever. The disease was first found when some members of the First Nations had found dead bodies laying on the beach. Our final discussion is with Jacqueline Peralta, who is a survivor of the smallpox disease. What was your experience like with smallpox, and how did it affect you?
For me, the smallpox disease was followed up by measles and influenza and tuberculosis. And when I went to talk about it to my doctor, he was able to provide me a treatment and vaccine for the disease.
And did you know that there was a vaccine for smallpox?
No, I actually didn't until my doctor told me about it. And I did some research on it on my own before receiving the vaccine and found out that it was created by a doctor in the 18th century named Edward Jenner. And that was actually the first ever vaccine created.
We will be right back after this small break.
Hello, my name is Dr. Layla, and in this world today, getting tested has been extremely important, and I want to tell you about getting tested for AIDS and COVID-19. I am also here to tell you that getting tested is very important for your health and could benefit you greatly. Getting tested is very simple, and you can set up an appointment to get tested with very few steps using just your phone or any device within reach. Getting tested for COVID-19 includes 4 easy steps of registering, completing an assessment, scheduling, and getting results, and this is all done online. Getting tested for AIDS and HIV can either be rapid tested, with results being given within 10 to 15 minutes, or regular tested, with results being given within 5 to 10 days, and the choice is up to you. Both COVID-19 and HIV can also be tested at home. Get tested. It could bring the world back together. It could save your life. Visit stdcheck.com and www.cdc.gov for more information.
We are back, and we will continue our talk about AIDS and how this 20th century disease has spilled over into the 21st century. AIDS and HIV cases have been on the rise since 1980, and the CDC scientists have been able to come up with numerous treatments to help cure a patient with the disease. One of the main reasons, believe it or not, why so many people stay away from testing for AIDS or HIV is because they are afraid of being discriminated against because of their sexual health. It is very true that a lot of times when people test positive for AIDS or any other STD, they will be heavily discriminated against by others. There are many new treatments for HIV and AIDS since the 20th century, and we have come a long way since the 1980s when the disease was first on the rise. Next up, we have the comic of the day. This comic includes a snarky yet true comment about how America has responded to the AIDS for decades, showing caskets piled up on top of each other and a sign saying too little too late. And that is all for today, everyone. Thank you for tuning in this week, and I hope to see you again next week on No Health Magazine News to discuss store-bought vegetables and vegetables grown at home. This is Jacqueline Mason signing off.